Hello and welcome to another discussion with my good friends Varsha and Jared here. Uh, Jared from the Fantasy Thinker, also known as the Bard of Portetza, apparently, and Varsha from Reading by the Reading Mountain. How are you both today?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Thank you for asking.
I am doing well.
Mm. Oh, he's being the bard. I see it. I see
Yeah,
what you
it would be
did.
amazing if you could do this entire recording in just that style, Jared. That would be amazing. I expect nothing less from here on out.
Or extremely frightening.
Dear. We are here to talk about Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay, which is the second read along we've done of Kay's after doing Tagana beforehand. Very excitingly, which I think, broadly enjoyed right across the board. I think that's fair to say. So we're going to do a spoiler discussion of this. I mean, there will be start off with very high level thoughts and that kind of stuff, but we'll get into the weeds quite quickly, I think, on what we thought about this book and the things that it brings up and talks about and that. But we'll start with high level thoughts and what we thought about in general enjoyment of the book. Now I'm going to start with Jared because Jared's given us a bit of a spoiler for this one because he already had this in his top books of last year of the recording we did, but and he's already posted a wonderful review which we've just been discussing before we started recording. So yes, Jared, high level thoughts for Song for Arbonne.
Yeah, this I lost my review, so I can't tell you. But no, no, this is it's kind of funny. You want to say this is classic fantasy at its best, even though there's very little fantasy in it. It's it's on a secondary world, of course. That's fantastic. And as we go through, we'll point out the little hints of fantastical magic or what have you that are in this book, but very, very few. It has a very historical feel, medieval, I think a 12th or 13th century France, and maybe even 11th century. I gotta remember that. But the southern France, amongst the down by the Languedoc area, specifically, and the but regardless, the characters feel straight out of a fantasy novel. They have some of those classic roles and tropes, and this was written in an era where those things were very prevalent in fantasy writings and novels. But Kay takes it a little further, and he gives us this really deep characterization, and he makes us love these characters in different ways that makes the tropes not matter and makes them just makes you more involved with the story itself, and you don't worry about any of those. You don't worry about whether it's fantasy or history while you're reading the book. It's just a good book. It's just a really nice tale that's told very well. His writing is beautiful in many cases, and that's always a plus. And it's beautiful, but it also reads rather quickly as well. It's not it doesn't like the beauty of the writing isn't antithetical to a nice pace as you're going through it, and so all that was going for it, and I enjoyed it a lot. It didn't vault to the number one book of the year last year, but I had a really good time with it. There wasn't like any sections or anything like that bothered me, that where I would be like, oh, okay, it was good except for this or except for that. It was pretty much good throughout the whole thing, and you don't always get books like that. You don't always get these pleasurable reads that I really enjoyed just the whole experience going through the whole thing.
Interesting. I'm sure Varsha will disagree with absolutely everything that you've just said there. So, is that the case, Varsha?
No, Chris, absolutely not. I think, yeah, I did enjoy this book quite a lot. This is my fifth Guy Gavriel Kay book. I read the Fionnuala Tapestry, which is a trilogy. Don't really count those as separate books because it's one story, but five, my fifth GGK book. And yeah, I enjoyed it as much as I did all of the others. I love his writing style. I feel like he has this ability to get me really attached to all his characters, even the side characters. That it, so you're. I think this happened in Tigana too, and to a certain extent in this book, although not quite so much, where like you've had quite a bit of the story from a few characters' point of view. You've gotten like really attached to them, and then like we shift perspective and new characters are introduced. And normally that means like I maybe like them slightly less because they're introduced later or whatever. But in this case, I think every new character that came about had new reasons to get attached to them, to like love reading the sections about them. And like you said, Jared, like there's usually some sections that flag for me, some characters maybe, or some like parts of the story. But I'd be hard pressed to find any in this book that were like that. I think all of the threads were equally interesting and kept the pace going. So yeah, with all this said, like I like to think when I read these many books by an author about like the common elements of their story. And I think that one of the things that Kay does really well is yearning, which and it's not necessarily like romantic yearning. It's in Tigana, for instance, it was this yearning for like the right identity and restoration of their homeland, right? And here it's kind of different. It's arguably a slight romantic yearning, but not quite. It's more a yearning for the life that Bertrand, that's his name, right, could have had, and that sort of like perpetuates throughout the book. We'll talk about that, but and the other thing is like these small things that sort of make up the large story. I think the smaller characters are bigger than the larger story. There is a larger connecting plot, but I think the lives of the smaller characters that are sort of influencing the larger events. I think he does that really well and convincingly. Um, and then there's like the references to Fiona Var, which we'll talk about also, I suppose, which came up in Tigana and also in this. So yeah, I think it's different from all the other K books that I've read, but it's also very similar. Like you can see elements of his writing and the stuff that he repeats himself on, which is nice.
Yeah. I don't disagree either. I thought this book has the one word that springs to mind every time I think of this book is charm. This book has a charm. The characters have a charm to them, and while not necessarily romantic, you said I was romanced by going into the world of it quite a lot. Every time I went to pick up and read a section, you're in the flow of this beautiful place, Arbonne, that it is. I think a bit like Tigana, where they're kind of searching for the identity of a place and the sense of belonging to a place. I think this one kind of goes in the direction of basically putting your front line and center in this, so that you wish you were from there, because it sort of is a testament to, I think, a lot of the people who would read and love literature. Those things are present, and that kind of idealism is present within this world. And I think it's so interesting how Kay presents in the two books that I've read, and I've got to imagine Fiona Var is exactly the same. He presents his fantasy worlds in Southern Europe or in the Mediterranean, whereas an awful lot of other fantasy worlds are sort of based on medieval England. I often think, that kind of idea, which is a lot further north, etc. And he uses the more romantic, warmer weather, all of that kind of stuff bleeding through the pages into his books in a way that makes his books instant, even though it's only the second book of his, makes his style very instantly recognizable, I think, in a lot of ways. And I do like how his characters and his characterization of the characters kind of fit with their backgrounds and their kind of ideals, rather than kind of being against those. And even how he sets some other characters up who we think are going to be antagonists or otherwise, as being kind of misunderstood or otherwise, and he sort of plays with that towards the end. I think the other thing that kind of comes from it is like I love the moment in this, but I think if you were to tell somebody the start of the story and the end, they would think it's an incredibly predictable story in a lot of ways. You know, there's not really a deviation from what you think of where it's going to end up in a lot of ways, but the drama in the middle of the scene-to-scene basis is really juicy. Because I think there are a lot of like twists and turns, etc., that take you on that journey before we get to that classic end. I think of Blaze's character, and absolutely charming without very much magic, as you say, but it's very fantasy feeling world. It has all the other trappings of a fantasy world, and the things, the kind of high castles, high kingdoms, all of that kind of stuff is very present within this world. So like Song for Arbonne, I think I liked a bit better than Tigana, because I think Tigana hits higher highs, but I think Song for Arbonne doesn't sag at any point throughout the entire book. I think it's interesting right the way throughout. I felt like Tigana, when it started to concentrate on two characters solely rather than the bigger ensemble, I think it struggled a little bit. I think this one doesn't have that problem and doesn't kind of face that problem at any stage, because there are lots of scenes where you think there's only two characters in a room or three characters in a room, and it turns out there's 20, you know, and they get revealed one by one through it. And I love those scenes again and again throughout the book. But the big question that I think that comes away from me from the entire book is that it seems to be a study about many things, but primarily about gender and the facets and traits that are associated with the feminine gender and the male gender, and almost making kingdoms out of those facets, not just in terms of who rules the roost in terms of that, like Arbonne's ruled by a female kind of dynasty, it feels like, although how they rule is not entirely certain. And then obviously Goro or Gorhot, or whatever way you want to call it, is very male dominated in a very different way. So what kind of thoughts do you have about how those kind of gender things are presented? And I'll start with Varsha, because I'm male, she's female. This is an interesting perspective. And also I think because in general, I think we as the reader, male or female, are rooting for Arbonne. You know, I think very clearly Kay has set that up, which I think is another interesting point to make.
Yeah, I think what I liked the most about that is, the separation is quite there. I like there's these like manly attributes that the Gorhotians are that they celebrate, and I think as soon as a woman took over Arbonne, it's suddenly a reason to think that she's weak and we can take it over. I think that comes to the foreground in the biggest way in that scene with the king's court, where, like, you know, this is like indulging in all kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. Like, I guess like it's a very sexually imbued scene, I think, and but like there's something that sort of inherently repulsive about that scene, I think, whereas nothing in Arbonne felt like that. And I think we're sort of setting up like these people think these people are bad, and I guess we're seeing a little bit of the, not hypocrisy, but more, you know, okay, you decide what you want to pick between these two, right? Like, even if you have these ingrained ideas about masculinity and what that entails, if I feel like that scene is maybe set to throw you off of that and make you think about it a little more. And then I think the other thing that they did really well was the inherent assumption about all the Arbonne warriors is because they indulge in this bard culture, they must be weak. They probably don't know what they're doing. They probably are not even good at fighting, but they all turn out to be at least as good, if not better, than the Gorhot warriors, right? So, and that keeps coming up. Like, whichever Gorhot perspective we are in, they keep being surprised at how well these Arbonnaise, was that the way they were called, fight. And so, like, I think he did do an excellent job of showing that things that are typically construed as soft does not necessarily mean the person is soft. In fact, some of those things might give you strength as a person and might even make you better from the inside. Like there's this distinction between like superficially appreciated characteristics and things that like make us who we are and like more human. And I think there's like maybe a clear preference for one over the other, or at least like and I think the nice blending of those two with the Arbonne is explored really well.
Yeah, it's kind of Kay is actually very in your face about how he sets up the differences between these two kingdoms. He doesn't. It's not very subtle, actually. It's Gorhot is they follow a male war god, basically, who that's their religion, and Arbonne has a goddess who sits up on this, has their priestesshood on this this island that is hard to get to and stuff like that. And so they're set up that way in their religion, and they're set up that way in how they approach everything. And Vasha, you mentioned that scene. It's a very misogynistic scene, and that is attributed to the Gorhot, viewpoint, because the women in their society are definitely suppressed and are not allowed to express themselves and not allowed to be anything other than basically breeders for the next king or the next noble family line or what have you. And he sets up this situation where people are trying to get away from that. That's part of what happens to the woman who ran away. I don't remember her name, and it also is why Blaze, our main character, has run away, and that's where Kay throws a wrench into the works, is by having this strong male figure running away from this overly masculine society, and he plays with the subtlety of that by having this character Blaze, who we're supposed to be rooting for. At the beginning of the book, he's kind of chafing at this patently silly culture he's become involved in. So even he has his own prejudices towards the people he is now running to and working for. And part of the book is him overcoming those prejudices and learning. And that was wonderful character growth, I thought, on the part of the main character. And so it's not subtle, but it's wonderfully done.
Yeah, absolutely. The use of Blaze to show that progression or to show that difference and change, I think, is masterful, as you say. The kind of idea that he is a gun for hire at the start, he doesn't really care who he's fighting for or he's representing at any stage. For many times at the first, when people ask him what he thinks, he says, I'm not paid to think, I'm paid to fight, so to speak. That's my only job here, until it gets placed in his path and he has to make a choice quite early on in the book about kind of his long-term future and his own long-term thoughts. And he doesn't make that choice immediately, but it kind of puts the reader in that position of, well, what do you think he should do? And it's helped obviously by the fact that we get some background into his dad and the way that he was brought up and all of that kind of stuff. That helps the reader make their mind up about what he should do. But I find it really interesting about the role of women within both societies in one way. You're absolutely true. Like the Gorhot suppression and the idea that females are there are provide heirs, very classic fancy trope, in a lot of ways, contrasted with the kind of freedom of expression and even the freedom of love that seems to exist within Arbonne, because nobody's getting hung up, to me it seems like anyway, on sex outside of relationships and stuff. There's many examples of that happen throughout the book, where people will kind of just give themselves over to another person just for the moment, you know what I mean, for that enjoyment, rather than just
there's a holiday around it.
And art, absolutely, yeah, exactly. So it's much freer. It's much freer, but it's not repressed in any way. You know, it's very much freedom. But I think it's interesting that Bertrand, especially, is the kind of center of this, is the center male character of this, even though he's not the king. But he's the kind of the worst exponent of this, it seems. An awful lot of us. He stole away another man's wife. He doesn't seem to have any ties. He seems like a very free spirit the whole way. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that. And I think it's interesting to think about him as being this embodiment of the male within their society, or certainly within the book of that society. Contrasting him then with Blaise, who actually I think has a bit more of the ties to his own culture, as you kind of rightly said, you know, and I'm trying to shed those and actually see what that means to him, because he obviously gets involved with some of the characters in here in much the same way. He has multiple relationships within this short period of time, and we even find out about his previous ones with his brother's wife. So he's no saint either, as it turns out. So I find that whole representation of, you know, their culture as being kind of, on one hand, possibly soft, as you kind of say, that kind of feminine traits of like they're moon god worshippers. They get their strength from the moon goddess on it. They have this freedom that they don't have these tightly knit necessarily relationships, or classic relationships, I suppose you would probably turn around. There's a sort of freedom within that, but yet there seems to be a much more cohesive society of involving everybody and not just the couple of individuals that is the king, etc. And I do think that there is something to be said about how we are forced to misjudge some of the characters that are in here, like Urt, him as a character and what his ideals, because he seems to be somebody that is racked by revenge, etc., throughout the whole story. But that comes out, and that's one of the twists, etc., that we get through the end of the book that I think is really, really interesting.
Yeah, but there does seem to be a hint of a price for some of this freedom, and that was reflected in the price that had to be paid when Blaise was hired to steal that guy away from the island. And and one of the high priestess was saying Rian exacts a price, and so you wonder, as the book progresses, we find out what kind of price Blaise is going to have to pay for taking some of the actions he did towards the end, in the decisions he made. So I found that interesting, whereas the nobility, the king of Gorhot, the only price he paid was, you know, his life, basically, and you know, and frustration that things weren't going his way or what have you. But it was interesting, because he was kind of the, you know, he was kind of the mustache twirling villain in this piece, and like this, you know, so. And so his form of basically dictatorship, authoritarian rule has a price that is paid by the people under him, whereas the price that Arbonne's people pay is more of a sacrifice thing in order to keep what they have, and that seems to be another difference between the two kingdoms.
Yeah, it seems very akin to Game of Thrones, isn't it? The people of the north and King's Landing. It's sort of a similar kind of idea, although obviously King's Landing is a cesspit in Game of Thrones, but kind of, again, that kind of a different ideologies depending on where you live and the weather and all of that kind of stuff. And it's also tainted with this idea that Gorhot sold off its people, basically, in a previous conflict. You know, basically, in order to make progress, or whatever way they were talking about, they basically sacked off people that were their own lands people, which is the reason the Blaze left in the first place. And again, we don't find that out in nearly 2/3 of the way through the book. I think in a lot of that is we know that there was a treaty, but we don't know what that entailed until much later within the book. Yeah, and again, all of these layers that go in to kind of contrast these two very different styles of life and very different styles of upbringing, because one is militaristic, one is definitely not, and yet they are coming to a conflict at some stage. It seems inevitable, but that they realized that they needed to enlist Blaze. They realized what either their weakness was, or how they would win the war over a long period of time. How they would get peace over the longer period was to try and integrate and get people from both sides to have similar ideas, or experience the other side of life, which I think was what an awful lot of the book is about, is Blaze kind of understanding and realizing different natures of existence and systems of government and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Blaze had experience of a king that he respected too, right? And I think part of his reason to leave is he's seeing how much his father is the hand behind the throne, and the king is just sort of blindly letting the guy run things and doing what he says. Plus, he's a despicable human being to start. So he hates his father's ideology. He doesn't, which is interesting because he doesn't think very highly of the Arbonne culture, but he doesn't think that they should be burned down for it, which is what his father wants. And I think another thing that we probably will talk about later is the religious conflict that's at the center of the main events of the book, and the man behind it all, and like just one man's hubris or idea of what loyalty to his god entails. But he disagrees with that, and so he wants another way. So that's interesting too. Like I like that Gorhot didn't traditionally like have terrible kings. It's just like this one guy he's bad, and so Blaze needed to do something about it, and so he left, which was interesting. Like they don't have like a nice culture for women, and they all of that is still there, but the king was apparently someone Blaze could respect before, which now it's not the case.
Yeah, we definitely we see towards the end of the book, isn't it, that Blaze pities Adamar, the new king, because he is such a patsy. You know, he has a sorrow for his existence because he isn't strong enough, and he is at the behest of these people behind the throne, so to speak, which is his father. And obviously he's influenced by the fact that his father tried to manipulate him in his entire life, and he's not responding to that at any stage. But as you would say, he doesn't really have these people that he respects in terms of kingship on the Arbonne side. That comes very much later. And in fact, I think it's a very classic fantasy conflict thing that he only sees it within battle. You know, people, when he's battling alongside people and he sees their valor and their greatness at that stage, that's when that respect comes at that stage. It doesn't come before that, and he makes his decisions about a couple of people within that battle at that time. So I feel that's another really interesting kind of point that Kay explores quite a lot within the pages, so to speak.
Yeah. What?
It's interesting because when he was on guard for the Duke, who was sneaking around with the other guy's wife, Blaze was sitting there. He was actually talking. It was his own thoughts that were showing there, and he was bothered by the dishonesty of the situation. He was bothered by both the woman's duplicity and the man's idle avid pursuit of pleasure at another's expense. And that's, that just brings up once again his personal viewpoint of the like you brought up before, the gender differences and stuff like that. And um and I don't think he personally knew how to um process that at that early stage in the book. And I think part of the book is him learning how to come to terms with people and the things they do, and learning how to go look beyond the actions of either duplicity or idle pursuits or what have you, and see them as more noble creatures, just trying to live and get by. And I think that's I really love Blaze's growth as a character and how he originally viewed things and how it just changes so subtly throughout the whole narrative.
Absolutely. Yeah, his change as a person is wonderful to see, because as the central protagonist, you learn to love him more as we go through the book. As he kind of, we get his kind of obviously inner thoughts, and for the good and for the bad. We see about the testing of his relationship, like the assassination attempt of Bertram before, when he goes to meet his friend, his close personal friend, in the tavern,
in the garden or tavern, yeah,
in the tavern, and then has secrets to hide and all of that kind of stuff. And it's only when he's faced with that at the end of the day that everybody else is just waiting for him to prove his worthiness, if you know what I mean. He has to tell the truth. Everybody knows what went on there, but he doesn't know that they know at that stage. I mean, whether it's through the goddess Rianne that they're getting this information, but this is where the mysticism of the world comes through, and we're not really sure and where the magic really lies within this land, or if there is any magic. But the priestesses, etc., seem to know what's happening at all times. They seem to have a good handle on everything without necessarily any power apart from knowledge. At that stage, which I think is really interesting to kind of think about, in terms of like when you're waging war and these things. It was what good is that knowledge if you haven't got might? But obviously there are other ways to fight wars than that. So Blaze as a character is incredibly memorable, and I think incredibly honourable, and incredibly easy to root for throughout the book.
Yeah, and it's also because he's it's weird because you have all that, but he seems like such a typical fantasy character when you first read. You get introduced to him, and then you find out that he's a son of somebody important, and and he has a destiny that he's going to have to fulfill, and eventually, he proclaims himself king. So it's just like that whole hidden king trope that's going on. And he did this in Tigana too, so this isn't anything new for Kay. We've seen this before from him, and I think there's a lot of similarities to Tigana in this book, and I think that's kind of funny, because I find it funny that there are people who praise this book highly and don't like Tigana, and I don't understand that, because it really is a very similar, and his style didn't change that much from this one book to the next. It was pretty good. So I find that kind of puzzling sometimes, that people bring that up, but
yeah. I wonder actually about Tigana in comparison to this, because Tigana has the prince, should I say, of an unknown region, and it isn't as based in the tall castles, all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of got that Romany feel to it, and the gypsy kind of feel to it. And I wonder if it just sits a little bit too outside most people's kind of fantasy comfort zone, if that makes sense. It's kind of a bit removed from that.
Yeah, granted, the magic's much more in your face in Tigana than it is here. So I don't know if that's the difference or not, but
but I do agree with you. I think stylistically, the way the books are written, the kind of characters that are portrayed within it, Devon's very similar to Blaze, I think, in an awful lot of ways in those two books. They've been incredibly similar to me in terms of tone and style.
Yeah, and Bertrand feels very similar to the other guy. I forget his name, but
Yes.
yeah.
Stephen, maybe, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
a long
that.
time ago since I've read Together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kudos for remembering Devon, by the way. I
Yeah, no kidding.
couldn't if I tried.
Yeah. And just to finish off on Blaze the Bit Percent, and I did touch on this before, he's not exactly a flawless character. You know, he does a fair amount of womanizing throughout this story. Does he sleep with, we know of, 3 different women in the space of about 3 months in this, this thing, including his wife's, or his brother's wife, being a father to her child, etc. It's not as if he's this kind of angelic kind of creature, but he is kind of the what is the word that I would use to describe him? He is this noble kind of breeding to him, and he has a sense of honor, but he's got young man syndrome, I suppose, in an awful lot of ways. He still hasn't worked his way out of himself and what's important to him enough at this stage to kind of make informed decisions like a king would or otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so that bit's good. You talked to Varsha about the religious aspect to it, and actually, I was going to tie this in a little bit to the fact that this is loosely based on, as you talked about in your review, Jared, real life events, in the Languedoc region of France, where the French government basically tried to shut down this carefree, basically breakaway religion. They were just a bit pissed off with the corporativeness of the Catholic Church, which obviously was a thing for about 400 years in Europe.
Yeah, what was it? What's the word I was looking for? Holy Koranos was the god they worshipped in Gohat, and very much,
god, I believe.
Yeah, very much resembled like the Christian religion, the shepherd, the shepherd figure, the war, not the war, but the crusading type of mindset, and the fact that Arbonne had this strange island with these strange priestesses worshiping Rian, this goddess, that was a mystery to the people of Gohat, in a overly misogynistic society. They don't like mysteries, and so that is to them, that is what they would consider heretical. In order, you have to be, you have to be upfront and outspoken about your beliefs and your religion, and you can't have these secret places and these secret, what they would call rituals. In a real history, they call it satanic rituals and what have you.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what Kay was playing upon with his narrative here. He was basing it very loosely upon the medieval Cathar heresy in southern France that happened somewhere around the 1200s or what have you. And I read a history book on that, on the Perfect Heresy there by Stephen O'Shea, about the Cathar heresy, the life and death of the medieval Cathars. And it was fascinating, this book. Read it a long time ago, but it's a nice little history book that could complement this kind of a novel. It's a lot shorter than this novel, but it would complement it nicely. It's definitely not like Kay didn't steal storylines from this. He just it's very loosely based, but some of the ideas about why a country would look upon a region within their own country, and Kay separates the countries in his thing, but it's still the same region, and how they could look upon people, for all intents and purposes, very similar to them, but just different enough. And then their viewpoints are quite different, to fear what they're doing, thinking they're up to something, thinking they're hiding something, thinking that there's something sinister going on beneath the surface. And that is what our Blaze's father wants to eradicate. And that is what Blaze realizes at the end, how powerful hatred is, and what it leads to. And he says hatred can be as powerful as love, though the singers may tell you otherwise. And and that is what leads to things like this, to things like crusades and calling people's heretics and what have you. It's hatred, and I think that's the biggest theme about the whole book. Really, is that hatred leads to these horrible things, and that love is really a better road if we can find it.
Yeah. Sadly so. Yeah, I mean, hatred and control, to me, it's that kind of thing that the reason the French did what they did is because they'd lost control of that region, and they, under the ban of the church or religion, is if you want to think of it that way, is what way you think of it. But do you think the fact that obviously this book ends in a way that basically says that Languedoc won, in this version of the story?
Yeah.
Do you think that's Kay's sort of way of thinking about and saying, but it doesn't have to be that way, but for some minor changes in history, etc., we can have a different kind of outlook, because there's like an awful lot of people that love literature, etc. I think most of us would kind of be of a similar thought, isn't it? Freedom of expression and all those things are things that we want, and freedom to choose and all that kind of stuff are good ideas to have.
Well,
and they're being snubbed out by the bigger, larger forces that people are.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, Chris, that is why this book is fantasy.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's a terrific point. Yeah.
Because if you look to history, it's not as pleasant. The ending's not
biggest
as good.
boats, biggest tanks. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's the way the real world kind of runs. Sadly so. Yeah, Percy, you want to add anything? If you sort of talked about the just maybe even back to the fantasy element of this, between the kind of work between Rian and Karanis as it is.
Yeah, I think I'm not familiar with the history, so thank you for that enlightening discussion. But I think the central reason why the conflict even happens, right? Like why the people of Arbonne needed to make Blaze what he is to a certain extent. They contributed, right? They sort of goaded him into declaring himself king, and he is uncomfortable with what his father ultimately wants. But it's ultimately the center of the conflict is this one man's need to root out what doesn't look like him, and at the center of that is the discomfort of something that's different from him. So and I think Blaze expresses this in some really powerful dialogue, that how can like your god want you to go destroy things like that? I don't believe that that's what the god wants. But that's this person's interpretation of how to keep his god as the center. Like just the fact that someone somewhere, it's not even his country, but in another country, a different god is worshipped, and And the bigger problem there isn't that it's a different god, it's that it's a female god. So the layers of hatred within that, I think, yeah, like you said, Jared, earlier, it's not quite subtle, but it's explored, I think, quite quite brilliantly with just how powerful that kind of hatred can be to rally the troops. But then also, I think Kay did justice by showing that many people weren't happy with this like burning of innocence, and so they switched over to Blaze when they were given the choice. So I liked that we got a little bit of both sides of that argument. But yeah, it was interesting that it was just this one person, though. It wasn't a larger group that wanted
That's
this.
true.
So maybe it loses some realism there, because usually you have a whole group that has these kind of goals. But it was a powerful thread regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. The baddie that was the dad, he's just a scumbag from start to finish. He's just master manipulator. If you know what I mean, didn't really have the means to be top dog himself. But, maybe he wanted it for his sons, and obviously he had multiple sons with which to make that happen. But
Yeah.
One found drink and lost himself, and it was nice to see his sort of redemption at the end. I thought that was a very nicely written part as well. To go along with Blaze's ultimate sort of rise.
That was
Yeah.
actually beautiful. Yeah, it was heartbreaking at
Mhm.
that point.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that scene was quite brilliant.
Yeah.
What did you think of the fact that the father sort of declaring that he manipulated Blaze or manipulated events so that Blaze would declare himself king? Like that was one of his goals for his sons, to become king, and so he was happy about it. What did you think of that? Like, do you think it's just this man trying to take credit for where he really had no role to play, or do you think he did manipulate events so that they are? And I think, if I remember correctly, there's also a conversation between Blaze and Bertrand where Bertrand points out to him that there were a lot of things that he did out of his own free will. It wasn't that he was manipulated into it by his father, but it's still hard to shake off that feeling that even this thing that he thought he was doing to defy his father was actually because of him.
Oh, I thought his dad was
Yeah.
full of shit.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of irrelevant. I think at the end when he turns around and says, "Oh, just like I planned," at the end, and it goes because he ultimately, it's not about him winning or losing. It was about the region winning, and it's about Arbonne surviving as an entity and a place to live. I think Kay wrote that really well at the end. We could basically say he was full of shit and all of that kind of stuff, but ultimately it didn't matter whether he won or lost, because the fact that Blaze is now king and this place has a chance to live in harmony on both sides for everybody is really what it's all about. And I think at the end of the day, that really comes down to the idea that then the father hasn't won. You know what I mean? Because that's not what he wanted. If you know what I mean, for that region. If you know what I mean, regardless of the sons or whatever else is happening. So, beautifully written and kind of teased out, because it was more about the events that happened and what happened at the end of it, and the uniting of basically Arbonne and Urt coming to rescue when Gorhot thought he was coming to save them, etc. That kind of stuff was really, really beautifully done.
Yeah. That, you mean the Miraval Duke bit? No? Sorry, I think I misunderstood what you said.
Oh, did we lose Chris? Oh, no.
I guess so.
Well, you mentioned, Vasha, earlier the Fiona connection. Well,
yes.
What do we got here?
So in Tigana, this is basically a layering of Fiona War references, which is kind of awesome. So Fiona War is case. I don't know if all his stories do this, but basically, if there are like, I think I don't know if it's a planetary system or just parallel worlds, one of those. But there are many worlds, let's say, and Fiona War is the first of all worlds. You'll read about that when you read Fiona War Tapestry. And I think like if you like heroes are reborn on Fiona War eventually, and like that's where they get ultimate salvation from, if I remember correctly. That's the lore around Fiona War. In Tigana, there's a conversation between what's the name of the sister, Diane, and her king, where they talk about um, how if they cannot be together in this life, he would like to be reborn in Fiona War where they can be together. Right, that's just a conversation between the two of them, and then the bard or the singer here in what's this book? A Song for Arbonne. She sings Blaze to Sleep using this lullaby in which she's talking about these two doomed lovers who are hoping to meet in Fiona War someday. So I love that layering of like, okay, we know what Fiona War is, then a reference to it, and now if we have a song about those two in Tigana, which is brilliant.
Huh, that's cool. Yeah, I was wondering because there was a mention by the character Rosala.
Hmm.
I forget who she was.
She's the sister-in-law, I think.
Yeah, and she mentions fabled courts of magic in those far lands.
Hmm.
She might find a home for herself in Kadar.
Hmm.
And I was just kind of wondering if that was if those fable because she mentions there's bazaars and lands of spice and silk and stuff and fair skinned women, and she was wondering and I was wondering if she was referring to Ghana or
Mm.
maybe the lands that's in Lions of El Rasad. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with that novel yet, but so I was kind of curious about what those far off lands were, and
Yeah.
in like in it because it seems like those far off lands, the magic's a little more
Mm.
prevalent than it is where they are.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I had that question too about whether some of the places they referenced were in this world, like in Tigana, especially because of that song, because it's referencing people, or it's possible that that's just something people say to each other when they're in love and can't be together. Um, but I was thinking specifically of those two characters in Tigana, which means that their lore is now widespread, and maybe these two are in the same world. But it could go either way. I think it works either way.
Yeah, the GGK universe
Yes.
stuff. Yeah, that's nice.
Mhm.
I mean, Varsha has this plan for his just obvious universe with her. So I mean,
Yes.
this is a strong case being made.
We're gonna circle back to Fiona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Read in publication.
One of the other things one of the other things I forgot to mention actually when we we're talking about the religion was the arrow from the sky. And how
Yes.
again
Right.
how that was like a subversion, but also playing into the divinity of that land. You know, they were perpetuating the myth at that stage, and I love the fact that it was revealed exactly what happened there, rather than it just being this mystery, that it was done and kind of put together, and them explaining exactly why it had to be like so and that kind of stuff. I loved that layer of complexion and stuff that went in and be trained for it.
That was pretty cool. I actually liked that a lot.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. It's the goddess will help us, but we also have to have contingency plans if she doesn't make an appearance when we need her.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
turns out that the contingency plan is what worked, which in a way is what the goddess wanted. I just love the layers and complexity there. Yeah.
And to further point out that that difference, the when Blaze was talking to the high priestess of Rian, um, she was telling him that the goddess's servants can do things you might not expect when we are centered in her mysteries. And he tells her, we burn women in Gohat where they traffic in the magic of darkness. And that's when she says, fear makes men label women's powers an act of darkness. Only fear. Consider the price of that. And that leads back to the sacrifice aspect of Arbonne and their religion and how it relates to Gohat. And the key point of it all is that a woman would not have dared to help Duke Valerie or his friend, with the poison arrow and all that stuff. A woman wouldn't have dared to help him in Gohat, whereas in Arbonne, his life was saved. And that's the difference between the two cultures right there.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And we got the dualities of the babies, the baby mysteries, so to speak. So we had obviously the fact that Blaze is a daddy, and then that Bertram was also a daddy at the end. And I thought that was interesting because I was sort of going, who is this other baby? I thought it was going to be a character that we knew about, and then it was just revealed to be somebody else at that stage. And how the story kind of flirts with this idea that she has free will, this other character, but not really free will. This idea that she'll have to be married off and do that kind of stuff to upkeep the powers or the life that they have. I mean, even though she's lived in secrecy and grown up by herself, so it's not totally an alien world, if you know what I mean. There's still a kind of a chivalry that needs to be upkept within the society.
Yeah. And I really love, this was kind of a really nice touch. I think that Lucien kind of dislikes, what's her name, Rian, for some reason. I think because she thought she's being mean to her friends or whatever. And then, it turns out that she's her rival or will be her rival in love for Blaze, right? She can't have him, but Rian is going to marry him, even though she maybe never met him before. So I really like that little dynamic there.
Yeah. And again, there's the fact that even though there's obviously an attraction between Lucien and Blaze, the natural order is broken. That she can't be, again, that chivalrous nature of the court and the fact that you can't marry outside your station, etc., still exists. So while it is a free world and free spirit and expression and art and all those things are important, there are still rules within a society that still exist.
Yeah. But the last epilogue or whatever it was, it seems to indicate that maybe she had a child by him in the future, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That was interesting. Some hint, nudge there. That was interesting.
Maybe that was just some wishful thinking on her part.
It was an entry from a history book.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we know now never to trust historians. So.
That's true.
That's true.
One of the scenes you had brought up to me before, Chris, was was her, Luciana, is that her name? The troubadour. Yeah. Was her when she was spying upon Blaze and his buddy there, who we didn't really know how much of a buddies they were at the time.
That's right.
That the scene was going on. We found out during this scene. And you brought up how much you loved that scene, that that listening from behind the door type of situation. And I did too. I really loved how we got the information in that circumstance, rather than having it just be from Blaze's point of view.
Yeah.
It's good
Yeah,
stuff.
there's lots of aspects of that I really like. I mean, that again, those ideas that or things that we don't know about, like the bit when he was winning the duel, and he got the three roses or the three things to hand out, who he was going to give them to and what they represented, etc. And I was like I know nothing about this world. I don't really know who you're supposed to give these things to, and that kind of having that bit of self-exploration as an outsider in this world, and the way that he was sort of getting accustomed to the corporals and how he kind of manipulated the power of that situation for himself, and offending some people and not offending other ones, and that kind of holding one of them back, etc. Like this book does that kind of people in rooms talking to each other and saying things to each other really well. It's really powerful throughout this entire book, and the mystery of actually what's going on there is really cool all the time.
Yeah. We'd never find out who he gives the third rose to in the end, right? The one for love. No.
I don't remember. No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
My memory is lacking there, definitely. Yeah. Any other points?
There was one point where, towards the end, when they're all jockeying for position to where the armies are going to go and all that stuff, and how the battle's going to play out. There was one point where I think it was Blaze and what's his name? Folk de Savaric and the Duke of Talair.
Yes.
They're all trying to determine where the battle's going to be, and they wanted to have it on certain ground before the Gohat forces got too far into Arbonne. And there was one point where they kind of just assumed where they were going to be, but they didn't actually have any real information. And I thought that was a little bit convenient that they just happened to guess right, So that was like, okay, that's just to get the players into place so he can tell the rest of the story. But I thought it was like, I thought it was going to be like maybe like a little priestess intervention or something like that. So a little divination or something like that was going to play into that. That's going to say, hey, you guys need to go here because I've seen this or whatever. But they kind of just was like, I think they're going to be here.
They're over here.
Okay, let's go there.
Isn't that what happened? I thought the high priestess saw a vision of the island between Talair and Miraval burning, and so she sent the armies there, I thought.
I didn't.
Or are you referring to a different battle?
Might have been a different battle.
Yeah.
No, I think I know the bit that you're talking about. Yeah, I think I know the bit that you're talking about when they were basically hiding in one place and they went, they're not going that way, they're going that way. But I sort of thought Blaze used his knowledge of his dad, if you know what I mean, in that case.
He kind of did, but it was it just seemed a little convenient. Yeah, that because mainly because I think it was presented that this army would be better off doing something else, and if they did that something else, we would have a different story right now.
Yeah,
the Cathars would have been wiped out. But they didn't, and they just happened to guess right, and it was a little. I was like, oh, okay, all right, I'll go with it.
Yeah.
But we don't read it for that. We read it for Kay's awesome, like you said, his excellent conversation scenes and listening behind closed door scenes and sexual tension and what have you.
Yeah, a lot of sexual tension in this one, right enough. There was a lot of as soon as the door closed and there were two people in a room, you were like, ooh.
What did you? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, as opposed to Tigana, where some of the sex scenes were a little bit leery and creepy between Katerina and Devon, where he was, so intoxicated by her, and there was like a power dynamic mismatch here, whereas the power dynamic seemed to be the other way around, and it sort of made it more, I don't know, more tasteful or something. I don't know. I thought it was very well handled. Sorry, go ahead, finish your point.
Oh, I was gonna say, I was gonna start a new one about the Countess of Arbonne. What's her name? How do you say it? Cygnus. Anyway,
Signia,
yeah. She. I loved her character so much. I think our first POV of her is her waking up on the day of her husband's death anniversary, I think, and like, I just love the development of her as this strong, powerful leader, and she plots with the Duke of Miraval towards the end to make him like leave the room when she makes Bertrand the head of the army, and then and yeah, so that leads to that whole deception that gives them their final win. But I just love the development of her character over the course of the book, as like she's really shown to be this powerful leader, and she has these like the dukes who sort of undermine her sometimes, like Bertrand does, but she sort of learned to work with that, which is really nice. She's not chafing at the fact that they don't do what she says. It's more, okay, I know he won't, so let's see how we can manipulate and use that situation to get what we want. So I just love her character. And also the other queen of the court of love, what's her name, the cousin of Alice, who tells us the secret at the end that she kept all her life.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was quite a brilliant character too. So I love all the female characters in this. Well, all the male characters were brilliant too, but yeah, there were many that I latched on to in this book.
Yeah,
great character work.
And that first character took full advantage of the holiday.
Yeah.
If you can,
it's good to be, it's good to be the Duchess.
Yeah, dude. But I thought it was an interesting counterpoint to, again, this idea that Blaise wants to be king of Gorhot, whereas the power doesn't lie in the kings in Arbonne. Like it lies with the priestesses and the kind of stuff,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
so interesting.
In that whole that scene where the you thought the guy was betraying, like what Vashi you just mentioned to set up, in that scene where he comes to the battle and you just don't know what's going to happen, and then that was very Tolkien type battle scene, where somebody arrives on the hills and they charge down and you're like, oh, they're on our side, yay. It's that was very very uplifting, and it was fun to read.
And they got to use or at the end there as well, when the basically Bertrand and him were obviously head to head over the Ariane is his ex-wife that he stole away basically from him.
Alice,
and Bertrand basically. Oh, Alice it is absolutely. Alice is the one. And Art basically putting him in his place, basically say, you were only hurt, your pride was only hurt, and he says, no, actually I always did love her. And it was this kind of like stab back at Bertrand to say that you did the wrong thing there, that this is not you're not that honorable as you make out, so to speak.
Yeah. Which is interesting because Alice, when in the prologue, when Bertrand asks her why she hates her husband so much, and she says it's because she can't forgive him for not being in love with her, whereas the Duke says otherwise towards the end of the book. He says, I always loved her, it was she who did not love me back. And like have to wonder at who's right or whose perspective
Mhm.
was, or maybe they were both right in their own ways, but like the complex situations that led to, I think that whole thing was just brilliant.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
Agreed.
we accepted as a truth at the start of the book.
Yeah.
You know, because it was in the prologue and it was set out, we that took that as an absolute fact in the story in the book, and actually to come full circle within the book and actually find out that wasn't true, and the
Yeah.
whole basis for that relationship, etc., started off what it wasn't on as solid footing as it nearly seemed. You know.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
anything else?
See,
I think we got it.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Good book. Suffice to say that I think we'll be reading more, Kay.
Yes, please.
I think
And
that's
circling
pretty,
back to Fiona.
pretty nailed on. Well,
Yeah, you know,
whichever
and
book. I mean, I'm sort of disinclined not to read Fiona of Our Next just to keep Varsha on our toes, but also I don't set our reading schedule. Varsha usually does, so I may have zero say in such.
Oh, not wanting to read Fiona is what I have in mind. So we're on the same page here. If I had my
Oh,
way,
okay.
not saying this is what we should do, we'd read The Lions of Al Rassan next.
excellent.
I think anybody that's stuck around this stage can see exactly what's happening right now, Varsha. Thank you very much. So yes, we'll be back with some more of that. If you want to hear more of our discussions, oh boy, have I got good news for you. We do a lot of them. We do a weekly podcast called Speculative Speculations, which you can find over on the Varsha channel, but we stretch Respective Speculations. We are currently reading Redemption Arc by Alistair Reynolds. We're going to read Solaris by Stanislav Lem next, and we do science fiction, short fiction there as well. There's a Malazan read along, 3-page tune that Varsha's involved in, and Jared pops in as a celebrity guest every now and again. To talk about that, they do about 100 and 150 pages a week at a time there. Which book are you on at the moment?
Midnight Tides.
Midnight Tides, brilliant.
That's the fifth.
So there's that. There's next week we will have our 28th, 27th read along in the SF Masterworks series of those, where we are reading Man Plus by Frederick Pohl. So you can look out for that next week as well. There is Oscar projects discussions happening at the moment. We discuss every Oscar winner from 1960. We're up to 19 something.
87.
At the moment, the next one we're going to read is Last Emperor. Last Emperor by Bernardo Bertolucci. We're doing that next week. So you've got 27 years of films to go before that. And this panel tune as well with Jared and Steve. If you want involved in any of those, you can come over to pagetune.com and join us there. Everybody's more than welcome to join any of those discussions. You can pop in and out, as many people do. And if you don't want any discussions, you just want to see good reviews, interesting conversation, otherwise you can pop up to Jared's channel, The Bard of Portessa. Now, sadly, he doesn't sing as much as he kind of professed to at the start of this recording, but maybe this is starting a new avenue for him. But you can head over to the Fantasy Thinker there.
Next review you gotta sing it.
Oh no.
Yes.
And then my channel gets canceled. Yes. All right.
Or
that's how you go viral.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Or you might have to start an OnlyFans page to take it in a different direction. There you go.
Oh man.
You can check out Varsha Reading by the Green Mountain. You can find me on the Chronicle of Chris. But thank you very much for anybody that has stuck around this far. It has been an absolute blast, and we'll catch you all again soon. Take care.